All right, well, kia ora koutou, everybody. Welcome to the Friday call. It's good to see you there. What we're going to do is, as usual, for those who are joining the first time, we're going to have a few people giving some updates from the sector. I think, as I've said before, it's really important to hear from other people's worlds what's going on. And sometimes we get so busy looking at our own world that, yeah, it's just good to hear from other perspectives. And then we're going to, I have a couple comments and things that I've been seeing as well. And then we will do our usual sort of splitting up into breakout rooms and have a little discussion. I know not everybody's able to join these video calls, but I get a lot of people saying they're watching the rerun on YouTube and seeing the summaries of the things that people are saying and discussing. So I think it's serving a purpose. And I'm conscious as well, it's a long weekend coming up. So I know there's a lot going on and people are busy with different things. But to start off, I've asked if Liz would mind giving us an update from Social Link and what they're doing in Tauranga, some of the things that they've been seeing, some of the results, I think, of a survey that you've been doing, Liz, and just generally some of your observations would be really helpful. So I'll hand it over to you. That'd be great.
Great, thanks, Stephen, and thank you so much for giving me a little bit of time. And sorry, I just dropped out before. I'm sure you've seen it in the media about the new payment they've introduced for people who have lost their jobs as a result of COVID, which is significantly more than for those who are on the job seeker benefit. And there's already been probably quite a bit of commentary on it and the concerns of it being a sort of a two-tier approach to the provision of welfare. So, I mean, I'm not saying that the people who are unemployed due to COVID don't deserve it. Would be arguing that everyone on job seeker deserves that amount of money. And I just wondered whether there was any interest in the group of the wanting to, I don't know, prepare a press release or something to government about concerns about this introduction of this payment system, which obviously is a lot more advantageous if you lose your job through COVID versus other methods. So that was the first thing I just wanted to raise. So that, I mean, and the benefit, it's quite a significant increase if you get this new income relief package. And the other thing I just wanted to raise as well is that Social Link, we're an umbrella organisation for the community and social sector in the Western Bay of Plenty, have been developing an action plan for how we want to do things differently, how we want to reimagine the social sector here in the Western Bay of Plenty. And we've just had a hui with our government and funders and the plans, but it's still a work in progress, but it's very much sector driven. And Karen here was a part of that. So I just wanted to let you know, yeah, so we're looking at how we can reimagine and recover from COVID as a social sector. And when we sort of finalise it, well, yeah, getting closer to finalise, happy to share that if there's anyone's interested in that. So more of a FYI. But yeah, in terms of that, the funding issue around the COVID payment if you become unemployed, whether there was any interest in this group maybe having a voice about their concerns about it. I know lots of organisations have. And if they were interested, then we'd be happy to draft some kind of press release which could be circulated and you could make changes to it as you see fit and put your signature of you or your organisation's name down if that's something that you wish to have a voice on.
Great. Well, thank you for the update and the information. One of the purposes of this group is to facilitate information and challenges and hear from perspectives. So yeah, I welcome the concept and the idea. I'd be interested to hear from others. Maybe what we'll do is save it for the breakouts and then have people discuss in the smaller groups and come back with their thoughts, if that's okay. And just before we go from you, Liz, Roz has put the link to this article. So what was going on there? You did a survey and this is some of the results. Is that what it was about?
Yep, that's right. So we did a survey of the Western Bay of Plenty social sector. So we had over 80 organisations participate, to which sort of showed what the impact of COVID-19 was having on the sector. We also compiled research that was happening across the country to see what the impact was across the country. I think North Auckland, and I think someone here from Canterbury, Liz Hawes, was interested in replicating the survey in her rohe, which is fantastic, which enables regional comparisons to happen. We're also planning to resurvey our rohe just to see what changes there have been. So this has provided us with really great information to inform our action plan, and I understand government have been using it as well, which is fantastic. And I understand now there's another survey that's come out as well that VNZ and PNZ and the various national bodies are also doing. So yeah, so we're just pleased to be able to get that local picture for us to inform our where we go to from here.
Liz sent out her survey and the newsletter came out about a day ago. So that's going to be going around Christchurch. And I forwarded your survey results to Nima as well, who I think spread it around other places too. So it's certainly been a valuable exercise for you to do.
Yeah, great. I think the timing was good. It was week 3 to 4 in lockdown. So I think that helped. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. And that does remind me, the one that Philanthropy New Zealand, Volunteering New Zealand, HUIE, and Centre for Social Impact, that's now live. So I've been including that in the update emails and things. And Sue she spoke about it last week and gave us an update. So that's now, the link is live. I'll put it in the chat in a minute in case anybody hasn't seen it. And I think she said that it's been spread quite well and they're getting quite a few responses. So that's good. But each of us will know networks and other people that we could ask to look at that. Yeah, that's really good. So can I turn, do you have something else to say?
I'll put a link in the chat about the new income relief package for those of you who aren't, if you're not familiar with it. And unfortunately I have to leave before 1, so I'll catch up with you, Stephen, or listen to the recording, the discussion that happens in the breakout rooms.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for the time.
That's perfect.
I don't think the breakout room discussion is included in recordings.
Oh, okay.
But it comes out in notes.
Yes, yes, true.
Yeah, people summarize it. So we'll try it. I have a feeling we're going to keep this call relatively short anyway, because there's one other person to say something and then we'll have a discussion. And anyway, there's not as many people this time, so it's going to be, I think, faster. We'll see. So Andrew from Charities Services, it'd be great to hear. We didn't hear from you last week. We had IRD talking, or was that the week before? It'd be good to hear from your perspective. What are you seeing? Yeah, how are things going at Charities Services?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for the opportunity again. I'm Andrew Phillips. I'm Manager Engagement Business Improvement for Charities Services. For those who don't know me, most of you know me anyway by now. I thought I'd just give a quick update. Stuart Donson, who was here last week from Inland Revenue, just fed back. They was really appreciated the opportunity to come and mentioned that they are based on the feedback they got from this, as well as a lot of other feedback they've been doing with the community sector. They are putting together a few little help points. Obviously, we're getting quite close, as the deadline for submissions to the Inland Revenue loan scheme are the 12th of June, but officials are currently considering whether or not to extend that. Obviously, as was traversed a lot last week, this isn't necessarily the right thing for a lot of community groups. So, but for those that it is good for, I think it's a good thing that Inland Revenue are making it clear that community groups can access, and they're thinking really critically about how they can communicate it effectively to the community sector. So that should be out reasonably soon, but not quite yet. From our perspective, we're starting our reminders for charities to file their annual returns again, now that more charities will be able to access their records, still being very flexible when it comes to extensions. but we obviously know the importance of getting that data. And it's going to be 2 years really before we get a really comprehensive picture of what the charity sector went through in this time. So we don't want to extend things too far, so that all that reporting then gets pushed back even further into the future. So it's kind of quite important that charities do report and try to report where they can. We published our webinar on responding to COVID-19, which had really, we had 460 people come, and which was really good to see that people were really interested, had a lot of questions, not all of which we could deal with, but we talked to MSD afterwards about addressing some of the wage subsidy related questions, and then got some answers. And it was question and answer page that's on our website was kind of created in consult with both Hapori Community Operations Funding Unit within the department and MSD. So it's got some answers to some of those questions, which I definitely recommend having a look at, and I'll put the link in the group chat if that's useful for people. We are also, you'll probably be aware, I don't know whether this is that relevant, but the official New Zealand COVID tracing app, it's been approved from the original release, which had some issues, but that is available for registered charities to use. We've had quite a few questions that have been coming through our info line about that, so you can let your networks know that it's absolutely able to be used by registered charities. They just need an NZBN. Now, if all incorporated charities do have an NZBN, they just need to look on the charities register and it will be there. If they're not an incorporated charity, they just need to contact the NZBN team, and they'll get the application process up and running. There's an email address on the NZBN website, and I'll also include that there if that's helpful to anyone. I'm not sure how many unincorporated groups you'll be working with, but it may be useful. And other than that, just reiterate the message we've been saying a lot. We're collecting a lot of stories from charities and trying to publish them sooner than possible. So our sector showcase on our website, we're populating with different kinds of groups who are reacting and adapting in different ways. And we're really keen to hear from anyone who would like to tell their story in our space. So please do contact us at info@charities.govt.nz. And that's me.
Can I just add, we're also on Thursdays having clinics, so you can have one-on-one time with our staff, so either an accountant, a registration analyst, or talk to someone about funding. They can just contact us and book an appointment, so that might be handy to put through your networks if anyone's feeling a bit stressed or they want some advice. And come and talk to us on a Thursday.
Great, thank you. It's good to get these updates. Yeah, one of the themes that's come up in the weeks has been the lack of media coverage. So the other night, I just started typing, and this little article came out. So I know it's not going to touch every potential perspective and point of view, but it's just come out like a couple hours ago and stuff, talking about charities and not-for-profits and community organizations. When you write something, you don't control the headings that they put often. So I didn't have it that way. It kind of is emphasizing charities. I had written it more about NGOs and other things. But anyway, hopefully it's shining a little light on the sector. So I'll put that in the email when I send out the summary in this video. And it hopefully is a way for us to continue to advocate for the discussion to keep going. I tried to write it in a constructive way. So yeah, that link I'll send around if you haven't seen it, and it might be something that your networks would appreciate and enjoy as well. So this is great. The chat is filling up with links. I think what we'll do is we might just split into 3 breakout rooms. I know some of you are going to have to go and have other meetings that start and things, but one of the things that I hear back is that people really enjoy being in a slightly smaller group and able to share with each other and hear other perspectives. So I think if I send you to 3 different rooms, and then if one of you can be appointed as the scribe and type up what your group talks about and email it to me afterwards, that way we can share it more widely. I know there's not as many people this week on the video call, but there are about 200 people now getting the emails. And I know that the feedback I get is it's helpful to get those. So I'm planning as well, if you're the scribe, if you can send it to me soon. Today I'm going to edit all this up and just send it out quickly this afternoon, because it's a long weekend, and by next Tuesday it will be, dated. So I want to get the survey link out and some of these articles and things. So in your breakout rooms, if you could talk about the topic that Liz raised and whether you see that there's appetite from your organization to be involved in some sort of advocacy about that, but also feel free to talk about what you're seeing and any thoughts that would be helpful for the wider group. That would be really good. So what you need to do is click join when I create the room, and we'll just have maybe 10 or 12 minutes to do this today. Thanks, everybody. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. I hope the discussions were helpful for you all. So what we'll do next is just run through, and each of the groups just give us a little summary. Like I said, if the person who summarizes it can send me an email with a few of the bullet points, key points that you went across, that way we can make sure that the information goes out wider and gets to the other people on the email. So group one, do you want to go first? I think there was quite a few of you in group one and less in the other rooms.
How do we know which group was which?
Well, there was one that had 6, one with 3, and one with 4.
Was that us?
One, Paul, yep.
Oh, thanks. Okay, cool. Right, reporting back. Apologies, Stephen.
Go for it. No worries.
Yeah, so a wide-ranging conversation. We started on the theme of arts and the re-emerging creativity and the critical conscience and the important role of the arts and the ongoing struggle that people are having in and around how to arrange public events in this new set of arrangements we have in a post-COVID world. And thankfully, being creative types, there's some good stuff going on in that space to get around that problem. Our conversation then moved on to the topic of the COVID allowances versus the normal unemployment and funding arrangements that are in place. And it was good. It was quite a helpful conversation because there's one way of reframing that was suggested, which is that those livability standards that have been set at a higher level by the COVID funding might be a much better and new normal if applied retrospectively across the whole space to help people have a viable and livable income. We talked about the relative costs and benefits of that and the amazing work that's been done by particularly the likes of Child Poverty Action Group, and I know the Welfare Experts Advisory Group also did some excellent work on that and the treatment of individuals, respecting individuals rather than always intervening as the state and assuming things about relationships that may or may not be the case in terms of who's going to pay for looking after kids, etc. So wide-ranging, good conversation, and we saw a positive opportunity for more widespread adoption of the new livable levels up to the government, though. Over and out.
Great. Thank you, Paul. That's perfect. That's really good. All right, we'll move on to the next group. Maybe before we do that, you started talking about arts at the beginning, you said, and just a preview that Anne and I are writing a paper about boards of the future and the role that creatives can play. So be watching out for that because I think this group will be quite interested in it. Cool. All right. How about group number 2? Doesn't really matter. The next
I don't know,
group.
I don't know which group we won, but we were rather a difficult group in that we were, half of us were Charities Services and the other, dare I say, I won't mention any names, was at the hairdressers. So it didn't really help for having a wide-ranging conversation. And we ended up having a sort of like a Q&A on trade aid. And I gave feedback as regards what's going on with volunteers and what's happening with business, so the shops open. And really reporting back that we were expecting things to be more grim than what they are. I mean, sure, the volume of business is down, but it seems that people are out there still wanting to buy product that has got comes from reliable, safe sources. But volunteerism was probably the biggest issue as regards how we're going to fill the gap of volunteers in the future if a large proportion of volunteers are from an age group, well, an older age group, or they're vulnerable people who are unable to hold down a full-time job. So it really didn't come up with any solutions or any answers, just really highlighted the issue of changing for how charities will be able to manage to deliver their services in the future.
Great, thank you. That's good. And the last group, anybody want to report back from there?
Liz, I was going to nominate you. Oh, Liz just disappeared. Kate, I'm going to nominate you. Did you like how I did that?
Okay. We just really kind of chatted about looking more long term, I suppose. So, how charities are going to be funding themselves in case, you know, when funding streams might be smaller, like coming from gaming trusts and things like that. So, just thinking about how to, I guess, support charities perhaps next year or further down the line, and how they'll be impacted in the future. And then, yeah, just Liz talked a little bit more about the discrepancy, I guess, in the wage subsidy for the people who've lost their job due to COVID versus people who are just on the job seeker benefit.
Great. Thank you.
I have a question to put to the group, if I might, Stephen. Is anyone here aware of the so far unreported news that those who receive, businesses who received the wage subsidy and have not qualified are giving it back? There's been some coverage in Auckland about private schools, for instance, and I wondered if some individuals or self-employed or sole practitioners were currently being looked at by government in terms of having to refund what they didn't need. I'm not aware of it and wondered if anyone else had heard about that.
I haven't heard about anyone being, because it's been investigated. I know of a couple organizations that have voluntarily done the right thing and paid out because either they realized their job wasn't as bad as it was, or there's one organization that I'm on the board of where in the end, the person left employment, so therefore we didn't have to take away subsidy. So again, doing the right thing and giving back what was coming from that individual person. But I haven't heard of any that have come through investigations.
I had a friend who got rung up by the investigation team and was asked as to why only one director had applied for the subsidy, and are they sure that they didn't want the other one to apply? So there was that was on the positive side of things, of actually being proactive and making sure that people were being covered. I thought it was quite interesting.
Good. All right. Well, that's really helpful. I think hopefully these interactions that you're having in the smaller groups as well, you're meeting people and potentially it leads to new connections that you wouldn't have had before. So my plan for the calls is just to continue them. This week, there's a lot less than we've had in previous weeks. At some point, I think we'll transition from doing them weekly to a slightly longer gap in between, and maybe have a more of a, you know, an agenda of here's who's talking and things. But for now, for next week anyway, for the foreseeable future, we'll just keep going as we're going. But as always, I welcome any feedback, any links that you can see that would be helpful for others. And that way I can send it out to the people who aren't able to make the call for whatever reason. But I get quite a few emails from people saying, look, I've got another meeting at that time or whatever's happening, but I really appreciate the summaries. So I think it's filling a gap. Karen, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just wondering, with the the arts funding, which sounds like it's great, and the sports funding, whether or not we could get a update from the DIA as to where the community funding is. Mm-hmm. And what are they going to do? Because, and especially around, I mean, I'm a big pro community development person, so I want to see that opened up and really invested in, because all the things we're talking about are going to need the fence at the top of the cliff, not always the ambulance at the bottom. And if they keep investing in the ambulance at the bottom, we don't stop this community, we don't invest in community development, we're just not going to get anywhere. I mean, this is such an opportunity, and we need to put that pressure on the DIA to open that up and make sure that community development and proactive and aspirational community development, not just meeting the need, but actually meeting the aspirations of, and I'm going to say small town New Zealand, because that's what I think is where there's the most potential, is to get covered. And so if perhaps we could ask the DIA and anyone else that anyone can think of to come along and actually talk about how they're going to invest in community development in this time.
Mm-hmm. I'm happy to extend, I know Leanne Campbell came to a meeting, I think about a month ago, one of these meetings, and gave a bit of an update from DIA, community operations side of things, but I'm sure she'll be very happy to come back. Again, I'll pitch it up and see when she might be available, but hopefully we could get her next week to give a little bit of an update of where things are at there. So we are putting together a little webinar next month. We haven't fixed a date yet, with Hapaipori Community Operations on funding options for charities post-COVID. But because things are still moving a little bit in that space, where we haven't fixed a date yet, but it will be sometime next month.
Yeah, because I think the emergency funds that are sitting around at the moment to build resilient communities at some point have to transfer back out of civil defence and into other mechanisms in the community. So what that looks like, whether that's going into councils and maybe even local government, talking about how their lack of investment in community development, and it's not their fault necessarily because everyone wants no rate rises, but there's that mash between what the philanthropics are funding, what local government's funding or not funding, and then central government. How is central government going to pick up the slack from those other two that they've dropped it? So yeah, I mean, it's a big question.
Yep, no, that's good.
Yep. The work that NEMA's doing at the moment is really focused on that, Karen. And they actually have a meeting, or they had a meeting, I just haven't heard back from it, where they're putting a whole plan of transition for NGOs and community organisations through to their senior staff. And part of that plan will be to work in collaboration with NGOs and community organisations about the best way for the transition to work. So I'm waiting to hear. And I think that Jean has asked to come and speak. Is it next week?
Yeah, I think so. She wants to talk about the invisible communities, right?
That's
her.
There's a whole report of a forum on the One Voice blogspot, Stephen, that you were at, that is mapping some of that material. But I just think it's really helpful at this point, where we actually are clear about what Karen referred to as aspirational community development, because that creative edge of the work that is done in what I loosely call the third sector, to distinguish it from the government and the commercial sector, that creative edge is often misses out under the sort of apparent focus on, not to use that term ambulance, but the sort of service provision is often so needed that the aspirational aspects get lost. And I think all that can be done under those circumstances is to actually simply allocate not a large amount, but a specific amount to the aspirational parts. And those were the ones that got lost after the Christchurch earthquake. And so I'm sort of speaking out of experience here, where we had a lot of really aspirational projects, but they were okay for the first little while because you could get a bit of initial project funding, but you couldn't keep them going. And it's that transfer into ongoing funding that is sometimes one of the difficulties, but more importantly, I think it's the identification of the new needs on the block that need attention. So, because community development, everybody does community development. There's a lot of community development workers around the place who are not necessarily involved in the aspirational stuff, yet they're called community development workers. So I see you nodding, Karen, but I think that that's just, I mean, it's not that it's either or, it just needs to be both and they need to be clarified as to what is what. And the forms of funding and the mechanisms for reporting need to be a wee bit different for the creative ones. So there's a bit of experience around, and it would be good to use that experience, while not denying the huge need there's going to be for just meeting people's real needs tomorrow. You know, that's a very specific thing, and it needs to be done. But also, I would argue that without that creative space, the hope in the community diminishes by the day. And the number of people that you speak to, is Dean, are you still on the call, Dean? No, Dean was here briefly, but Dean was talking this morning. He works for the Time Bank group. That, you know, the number of young ones who are hopeless and harming themselves and suicides and things like that, and potential suicides, is just monstrous amongst the 20-year-olds in particular. So we need to keep that measure of hope and alive, and it is that part of the third sector that is the creative edge of the third sector. And, you know, we had the gap fillers are the famous ones, the greening the rubbles are the famous ones, but there's lots of others in the arts communities as well. A lovely project on art and working life, which was really brilliant. And so those are the ones that need space and a certain amount of funding, but the nature of the funding is distinct. It's not the same as a service provision response. And it just needs to be done and done well. And even if it's very small, I think it can grow like topsy once it's understood.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you for that input. I think that's the key thing. We're coming to the point, aren't we, where it's, okay, where's the opportunities? Where can we move forward positively? And how do we construct in a way that will ensure, you know, that we're building for the future? So lots of good things to think about for a long weekend.
And the language, Stephen, too. That's where that one voice thing report on that forum was an attempt to actually capture the sharing that went on that night about the real value of language. So perhaps if you could put the blog spot in the notes, that would be just useful for people who would like to look at that as a documentation of what went on when we had Porter Williams down.
Yep, that's fine. Yep, happy to do that. Yeah, and yeah, if other people have thoughts of, you know, to stimulate this, Craig Fisher and I have just been talking about trying to write something together about the future, you know, and just brainstorming, bringing concepts and thinking about these things. And then the other thing is Liz, before she left, she wanted our input in terms of this idea. She's put in the chat there, could there be a collective media release about the COVID-19 income relief? So what I'll do maybe is put her email or her contact info in the summary. And if anybody wants to reach out, then maybe we leave it at that you're welcome to and work collaboratively with her. Yeah, I think that would be the best way forward. Does anybody else have any final thoughts before we finish up? No?
Thank you, Stephen.
No problem. Yeah, I think I continue to view this group as important, bridging across. I'm saying this to a lot of people, but we're not representing youth or mental health or, you know, cancer or international NGOs or whatever. It's a chance for us to speak across many different parts of this sector. So,
with perhaps the exception of the environmental groups are missing.
It's true. If you know anybody, feel free to invite them.
Well, it's just that I think it's unclear as to what, I mean, yeah, when you say invite them, and what you don't know what you're really inviting them to, other than a discussion around the work that is going on through the various funding groups. And many people find the constraint about funding quite a difficult one to deal with, because many of them are not funded. Mm. Most of the smaller environmental groups don't get any money. They get maybe the tools from Environment Canterbury to do the project that they're doing, or they get support from government departments that they're doing the work for or with. But it's so I'm saying I think it is a bit different in the environmental sector, and because I'm in that, I can sort of, it take quite a while to explain the difference. Yeah. But it is actually really significant. But it's fundamentally, as I read it, it's caught up with the fact that they don't get any funding. Right.
Yeah, there's groups like the Bay Conservation Alliance, which is an umbrella group like Social Linkers for the social sector. And I'd be quite happy to approach them to see if they would like to join. Yeah. And
there's also the multicultural groups. It's you know, it is rather monocultural too in its presentation. And maybe we should ask the Islamic Women's Council person or someone like that to join, or I don't know. But then the question is, I mean, my concern would be, is it good use of their time, because they're so busy doing 500 other things, you know. And the same is true of groups like Environmental Defence Society, who would be really knowledgeable in terms of, you know, the environmental issues, and even ECO, Environment and Conservation Organisations, or Forest and Bird, or Greenpeace, or any of those sort of ones. But you see, I don't think that they use the same channels of funding or communication even that are used by the social. This is primarily social services, primarily. And that's not, I mean, I'm not criticising it. I'm just saying that that's what it is.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's helpful, and that may be the answer of why it's become what it's becoming, which is fine as well. There's no planned agenda here. It's just a chance for us to share and hear from each other. There are quite a few people who just get the email and have never even been to one of these videos, but they appreciate the summaries and things. So yeah. So the last thing is, if those of you who gave a little update, if you can send me a short summary, it just saves me having to listen back and type out what you said, which takes time. That would be awesome. And if you can send that to me sooner rather than later, because I'm going to go edit this now and upload it and then send the email out to everybody, given the long weekend. And if any of you are going on a road trip and you want some listening, Terry and I just did an interview about the Young Enterprise Scheme and everything that they're doing, which was one of the 180 I've done. It was right up there in the top 10. So it was an awesome interview, hearing her life story and what they're doing. It's really good work. So you can check that out. All right. Well, have a good weekend, everybody. See you around. Bye.